The galaxy thought it was watching a peace ceremony. Instead, it watched an empire murder the wrong man's brother. The broadcast was already live when Ambassador Elias Varren stepped onto the raised circle of pale glass at the center of the Hall of Concord on Salus Prime. He was alone. No human guards, no second envoy, no chair, no table. Just one man in a dark diplomatic uniform under a hard white light, while hundreds of alien officials looked down at him from curved levels above. Elias did not know the exact plan yet, but he knew something was wrong. 19 years of diplomacy had trained him to read danger the way soldiers read a battlefield. The exits were sealed, the guards were too close, the officials were too silent, and Archon Zarak, ruler of the Orinox Dominion, had not greeted him at all. That was not custom. That was a message. Elias kept his face calm, but his heart had already started to grow heavy. He had spent 5 years studying the Orinox. Other species argued, other species threatened. The Orinox did something worse. They believed their way was the only correct order in the universe. To them, disagreement was not a problem to solve, it was a flaw to erase. Elias had learned their language, their rituals, their posture rules, even the meaning of the color shifts that moved across the bone crests on their heads. He had stood through long ceremonies without moving because stillness mattered to them. He had done everything possible to build peace. And now, standing in that bright circle, he felt the truth settle inside him. None of it had mattered. Archon Zarak finally turned toward him. His towering body was wrapped in ceremonial metal threads, and the air around him seemed colder than the rest of the chamber. "The human envoy," Zarak said through the translator, "has been given many chances. Humanity has refused obedience. Humanity has crossed borders. Humanity has spoken to worlds that do not belong to it." The hall vibrated with a low sound of approval. Elias did not answer, not yet, because now he understood. This was not a meeting, this was a lesson, and he was the lesson. Across the stars, millions were watching, human colonies, trade worlds, neutral species, rivals, friends, enemies. The Dominion wanted all of them to see a human kneel. Elias almost smiled at that. They had chosen the wrong human. His thoughts moved not towards fear, but toward one person, his twin brother, General Cassian Varren. Cassian would be watching, Elias knew it. The two of them had argued about the Orinox many times. Elias believed peace had to be tried until the final second. Cassian believed some powers only respected force. Both men loved humanity. They had only chosen different weapons. Archon Zarak lifted one long hand. 2 armored guards stepped forward carrying hooked ceremonial blades. "You may speak one final surrender," the Archon said. "Kneel, and your species may still be permitted to serve." Elias looked at the nearest camera drone instead of the throne. When he spoke, his voice was calm. "My name is Elias Varren. I speak now to every world watching this." The hall went still. "I came here to protect peace," he said. "I came here believing understanding could stop war. I do not regret that. But peace without dignity is not peace. It is surrender wearing a kinder face." The guards kept walking. Elias did not move. "And to my brother," he said softly, eyes fixed on the lens, "you were not wrong. You were just waiting for this moment. Do what I no longer can." The blades rose. Far away, on a warship hidden beyond the border, General Cassian Varren watched his brother's final message, and for the first time that night he gave an order. They wanted the galaxy to watch one human die.
The galaxy had watched peace shatter in real time. Now they would watch war rise as one twin's death became the spark for a fire that could not be put out. The screen went black. For a moment, everything was silent. Then a simple message appeared. General Cassian Varren. Cassian's eyes were hard, staring at the tactical display in front of him. The bridge of the UEC Dreadnought Vanguard was quiet, too quiet. Every officer in the room had seen the broadcast. They had all watched their ambassador die on an alien stage, helpless to do anything about it. But they knew something else. The silence wasn't defeat. It was the calm before a storm. Cassian's reputation had entered every room before he did for one reason. He never failed. "Sir, the fleet's ready," Lieutenant Tanis said softly, breaking the stillness. Cassian's fingers brushed against the cold metal of the command chair. He didn't need to speak yet. His crew already knew what needed to be done. "Lieutenant, open all military channels. Broadcast the message from the Vanguard to every species still watching," Cassian ordered, his voice low but sharp, like the cutting edge of a blade. Tanis hesitated for only a moment before nodding and turning to her console. "Channel open, sir. You're live." Cassian's gaze remained fixed on the screen, where the image of his twin's final moments still lingered. He felt a burning emptiness deep inside, but it wasn't grief. Not yet. "This is General Cassian Varren of the United Earth Coalition," he said into the microphone, his voice steady. "My brother's death was not a mistake, but the Dominion made one." He let the words hang in the air for a moment before continuing. "Humanity does not bow to tyranny. Not now, not ever. You just killed the wrong man, and for that mistake you will pay." The screen split, flashing with the words, "Emergency Protocol Activated." Cassian's eyes narrowed as the room around him sprang to life. His fingers were already working on the controls, setting the ships in motion. "All ships, execute Operation Phoenix. Weapon systems hot. Set course to the Orinox Dominion." "Sir, I don't care how long it takes, Lieutenant. The Orinox will know they've made the wrong choice." The hum of the engines reverberated through the hull of the Vanguard, but it wasn't the engines that would carry the fleet this time. It was the anger. And it was Cassian's anger that led them. Not a simple emotion. It was a deep, fiery resolve, forged from years of watching the galaxy twist under the weight of oppressive power. And now he had to do what his brother had refused.
Elias had believed in peace. Cassian believed in consequences. The fleet surged forward. Across the space station at Salus Prime, the Orinox Dominion leaders had just started to regroup. Their initial victory had felt like an eternity. They hadn't expected this. They hadn't expected humanity to fight back so quickly, so violently. And now they would learn how wrong they had been. Back on the Vanguard, Cassian stood at the bridge's command rail, gripping the metal with both hands. The same frame, the same hands, the same blood that had run through Elias's veins. The lights flickered for just a second, a reminder that he wasn't just leading a fleet. He was leading a response, a retaliation for a brother who had never faltered in his quest for peace. And now it was Cassian's turn to do what Elias had only ever dreamed of. "General," Lieutenant Tanis called again, her voice firmer this time. "The Kavari fleet is in range, sir." Cassian didn't respond immediately. He didn't need to. He was already thinking ahead. "Prepare to engage. Full fleet salvo. No hesitation." The Vanguard was a symbol of humanity's strength, a beacon of pure resolve, and as the fleet moved toward the enemy, Cassian felt the weight of what was happening. This was not just a military strike, it was the start of something much bigger. This wasn't a battle between two species anymore. This was the beginning of a new chapter for the galaxy, one that would change everything. "Begin targeting sequence," Cassian ordered, his eyes locked on the readout. "And make sure every Kavari ship knows what happens when you take a Varren brother lightly." As he turned toward the main viewport, the immense size of the Kavari fleet filled his view. The gap between them and the vanguard was closing quickly, and Cassian's pulse quickened. This was it. He wasn't just fighting for a planet. He wasn't just fighting for humanity. He was fighting for the legacy of a brother who had given his life in the name of peace. In the aftermath of an execution, a fleet begins its journey to the heart of enemy space.
The galaxy watched as one brother's legacy ignited the war. Now they would witness the fury of a species scorned. The Vanguard tore through the cold expanse of space, its engines roaring like an animal in pursuit. Cassian stood tall at the helm, the weight of his brother's sacrifice etched into his every movement. His fists were clenched, but his focus was unyielding. This wasn't just a mission, it was a message to the galaxy. "All ships converge on the Orinox fleet," Cassian commanded, his voice low but filled with deadly intent. "We break through their defenses. We end this now." The Orinox Dominion had underestimated humanity's resolve. They had believed Elias's death would break them, that the UEC would crumble into despair. What they didn't account for was the depth of humanity's strength, the way one life lost could turn into the ignition for millions of lives fighting back. As Cassian's fleet surged forward, a new wave of tactical orders flew through the calms. His fleet had been split into smaller units, each with a specific mission to cripple the Dominion's stronghold. The Orinox main fleet was positioned in a tight defensive formation, blocking the approach to their home world. But Cassian wasn't afraid of their strength. He had known it would come to this. They had played their cards too early, and now they would pay. "Commander, the Kavari have activated their phase shields," Lieutenant Rask said, his voice steady but tense. "They're preparing for us to engage." Cassian didn't flinch. "Let 'em. We're already ahead of their game." "Sir, their harmonic pulse batteries are charging. They'll fire as soon as we're in range." Cassian didn't need to be told. He had seen this before, studied the patterns in the Kavari's tactics. Their phase screens were a challenge, but their over-reliance on harmonic resonance made them predictable. It was time to exploit that weakness. "Deploy the quantum disruptors," Cassian ordered, his eyes scanning the display. "I want their shields offline before they even have a chance to fire." Across the fleet, a series of high-frequency disruptors powered up, releasing sharp waves of electromagnetic interference. The Orinox shields flickered for a moment, and Cassian's fleet immediately moved to capitalize on the weakness. "Fire!" he shouted. Railguns roared to life as the human ships opened fire, their tungsten rounds slamming into the Kavari phase shields. The first wave of fire caught the Kavari off guard. The energy barrier buckled under the precision and speed of the strike, its integrity faltering in key sections. The Kavari responded with a devastating harmonic pulse, but Cassian's fleet was already in motion, evading the worst of the blast. "All ships forward, target the heart of their formation," Cassian's voice rang out. "This ends today." The battle was intense, a symphony of weapons fire and tactical maneuvers as Cassian's ships pushed deeper into the heart of the enemy formation. The Kavari had expected humanity to falter in the face of such overwhelming numbers, but they had made a fatal mistake. They had underestimated the Varren bloodline. The battle shifted in an instant. Cassian's flagship, the Vanguard, led the charge as his fleet broke through the weakened defensive lines. The enemy ships, once synchronized in perfect resonance, began to fall apart. Their formations splintered as individual captains made desperate attempts to reorganize, but it was too late. The Kavari, so used to working as one, couldn't handle the chaos when their central harmonic core was disrupted. "Phase screens failing," Lieutenant Tanis reported, her voice sharp.
"The Kavari are scattering, sir. They can't maintain their resonance." Cassian's lips curled into a grim smile. "That's it. They're lost." The Vanguard powered through the chaos, cutting down the remaining Kavari ships with calculated precision. The Kavari flagship, the Absolute Accord, remained the final obstacle, surrounded by a wall of broken ships, but it wasn't enough. Cassian had already decided. He wasn't here to fight for honor. He was here to send a message, and to make sure the Kavari never made this mistake again. "Prepare to target the Absolute Accord," Cassian commanded. "We'll take it down, once and for all." As the Vanguard closed in on the Kavari flagship, the Resonance Leader, Archon Zarak, finally issued the command for full retreat. But it was too late. The Kavari had never seen a species fight back like this.
The Kavari had underestimated humanity's resolve. Now they would learn what it truly meant to provoke the wrong species. The Absolute Accord was a fortress, massive, imposing, and built to withstand the most devastating forces in the galaxy. But even the strongest walls can crumble under the right pressure. Cassian's fleet, battered but relentless, pressed forward with unwavering purpose. The Vanguard was leading the charge, cutting through debris fields and wreckage, its weapon systems firing at full capacity. Cassian watched the tactical display as the final wave of human ships moved into position. The Kavari had made their last stand at the heart of their fleet, but they were far too late to reorganize. The resonance was shattered, their fleet scattered in disarray. "Target the Absolute Accord's main harmonic array," Cassian ordered. "If we take that down, they lose everything. No coordination, no communication. We finish it." A chorus of confirmations rang through the bridge as the ships adjusted their formations, converging on the Absolute Accord's exposed flank. The remaining Kavari ships tried to regroup, but their desperation was evident. They were no longer a united force. They were a scattering of individuals, lost without their harmonic direction. "Prepare for final assault," Cassian said, his voice cold and steady. "We end this now." The human fleet surged forward, railguns charging, and missiles locked onto their target. The Absolute Accord's phase shields flickered under the pressure, weakening with each direct hit. Cassian's grip tightened on the command rail as the distance closed between the two fleets. There would be no mercy, not for what they had done. "All ships, fire!" Cassian commanded. The combined strike hit the Absolute Accord with a deafening force, the shields crumbling under the weight of the human weapons. A series of powerful railgun rounds and missile salvos tore through the flagship's defenses, shattering the harmonic spines that had kept it functioning. "Direct hit on harmonic core," Lieutenant Rask called out, his voice tense. "They've lost the signal. The Absolute Accord is off balance." Cassian's eyes never left the screen. The flagship was faltering, but there was no time to celebrate. The Kavari had underestimated the power of humanity's retaliation, but they hadn't counted on the strength of one final move. "Prepare to fire everything we've got," Cassian ordered, his jaw clenched. "We finish it here. The Absolute Accord doesn't leave this sector." The final strike hit with surgical precision, and the Absolute Accord, the symbol of the Kavari Dominion's power, began to break apart. Its once impenetrable armor was no match for the raw fury of Cassian's fleet. Explosions erupted across the flagship's hull, the harmonic chambers destabilizing and causing a chain reaction that tore the ship into pieces. Cassian allowed himself a single breath as the flagship's core went dark. The warship, once a beacon of the Kavari might, now drifted in pieces, a tomb for the lost dreams of the Dominion. But Cassian's satisfaction was hollow. There was no victory dance. There was only the grim reality that this war, this destruction, had a price. "Sir, we've eliminated the remaining Kavari fleet elements," Lieutenant Tanis reported, but there was no celebration in her voice. "They're in full retreat, scattered across multiple sectors." Cassian turned to face his officers. "We've won, but at what cost?" He looked out the viewport, past the wreckage of the Dominion fleet, to the world of Salus Prime below.
The war had ended, but the damage had already been done. Thousands of lives lost. 2 brothers, one a diplomat who believed in peace, and the other a general who would stop at nothing to protect humanity. "Tell the fleet to hold position," Cassian said, his voice thick with something deeper than anger. "We don't chase the fleeing ships. Let them report back to their leaders." "Understood, sir," Rask replied. The bridge fell silent again as Cassian stood there, staring at the battlefield. His twin brother's death had ignited this war, and now Cassian had avenged it. But the galaxy had changed in ways they couldn't undo. "Humanity doesn't kneel," Cassian muttered under his breath. He repeated it again, as if trying to remind himself of the truth. "We never kneel." His fleet had proven that today. They had shown the galaxy what happened when you pushed humanity too far. What had started with the murder of an ambassador had ended with the Orinox Dominion's most powerful warship torn apart. And with that, the message was clear. Humanity would not be crushed. Humanity would fight back, no matter the cost. The Kavari thought they had broken humanity.
Humanity had sent a message to the galaxy, but messages always have consequences. The Orinox Dominion had been shattered. The Absolute Accord was now nothing more than debris floating in the vacuum of space, a reminder of their failed attempt to dominate humanity. But Cassian Varren knew better than to celebrate too soon. The war had ended, but the cost would echo through the galaxy for years to come. The Vanguard sat in a cold silence of space, its hull battered but intact. Cassian stood at the command rail, staring out at the swirling debris of the Kavari fleet. His mind was elsewhere, though, far from the broken ships around him. His thoughts were with his twin, Elias, the diplomat who had believed in peace, who had given his life for the cause of understanding. Now it was up to Cassian to carry that legacy forward, but with the weight of war hanging heavily over his every decision. "General," Rask's voice cut through the silence, "we've received a message from the UEC command. They want to know what happens next." Cassian exhaled sharply, his fingers tightening around the command rail. "Tell them to wait," he said, his voice distant. "The fight's not over. Not yet." Rask nodded and turned to relay the order, but Cassian's mind was elsewhere. The fleet had destroyed the Kavari, but the victory felt hollow. The cost of war was always too high, but this felt different. The galaxy had seen what humanity could do when pushed to its limits, and now it would be watching their every move. "Sir," Tanis spoke up again, breaking his thoughts, "Kavari ground forces on Saelis Prime have surrendered. The colonists are holding their positions, but they've asked for our assistance." Cassian's eyes flickered toward the tactical display, where the images of Saelis Prime came into focus. The battle was won, but the aftermath was far from over. The colonists had fought bravely, but they were not trained soldiers. They had held on long enough to survive, but now they needed to be secured. "Set course for Saelis Prime," Cassian said, his voice hardening. "We've won the space battle, but we still need to win the peace. Deploy rescue teams. Prepare for ground operations." The Vanguard's engines roared back to life as it began its descent toward the planet's surface. Cassian sat in his chair, his gaze never leaving the planet. He could feel the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. Elias had fought for peace with every word, every gesture, but now, in his absence, Cassian had to fight for something else: survival. As the Vanguard descended toward the planet, Cassian's thoughts were interrupted by the sudden arrival of a new transmission. "General Varren, this is Fleet Command. We've received word from the Kavari leadership. They are requesting an audience." Cassian froze. The Kavari had been beaten. They had been humiliated. They had lost their flagship, their fleet, and their authority. They were no longer the dominant power in the galaxy. But even now, they wanted to talk? "Put it through," Cassian replied, his voice steady but tinged with disbelief. The screen flickered, and Archon Zerak's face appeared, his expression cold and unreadable.
The once proud leader of the Cavari Dominion now looked like a figure from a broken dream, his once shiny crest plates now dull and scarred. "General Varren," Zarak began, his voice low and controlled, "you have won, but know this, the Cavari Dominion is not finished. You may have broken our fleet, but you have not broken our will." Cassian didn't respond immediately. He could feel the bitterness rising in his throat, the anger from the years of diplomacy that had led to this point. He had fought for peace, his brother had fought for peace, and yet it seemed like the galaxy was always one step away from destruction. Zarak continued, his eyes narrow. "You have shown the galaxy your strength, and we have seen it. But remember this, the Cavari do not forget their enemies. This war is over, but we will rebuild, and when we do, humanity will be our first target." Cassian's eyes hardened. "Then let's make sure we are ready for whatever comes next." The transmission ended, leaving only the cold silence of space behind. Cassian leaned back in his chair, the weight of the conversation settling over him. The Cavari Dominion might have been broken, but the galaxy wasn't ready for peace yet. The echoes of war would reverberate for much longer than they had hoped. "We'll finish this," Cassian muttered under his breath. The war with the Cavari Dominion was brutal, but it was just the beginning.
The battle was won, but the war for peace had only just begun. The Vanguard hung in orbit above Salus Prime, its crew working tirelessly to secure the planet below. Cassian stood on the bridge, his gaze focused on the vastness of space. The victory over the Cavari Dominion had come at a cost. The galaxy was now watching humanity closely, waiting for the next move. The Cavari, once the dominant force in the galaxy, had been broken, but their message still hung in the air. We will rebuild. Cassian had expected the Cavari to request an audience. What he hadn't expected was the cold, calculating tone of Archon Zarak's transmission. The Dominion had failed, but their resolve remained. They would not simply fade away. Cassian couldn't shake the feeling that the war wasn't truly over, not until the Cavari were fully extinguished from the galaxy's stage. "General," Lieutenant Rask's voice cut through his thoughts, "we've just received an encrypted message from the UEC command. They're requesting your presence in the council chambers. It's urgent." Cassian straightened, his attention shifting to the comm station. "What's it about?" "Not sure, sir," Rask replied, "but it seems to be about a new alliance request. Something about a council meeting with the Trevaean Federation and Talisian Concord. They want to discuss post-war negotiations and future alliances." Cassian's jaw tightened. Negotiations, alliances. He had hoped for peace, but the galaxy wasn't ready for it yet. Old wounds, new tensions, they would always find a way to emerge. Elias had believed in unity, but Cassian had seen the darker side of the galaxy. He knew the peace they fought for wouldn't come easily. "Send them the message that I'll be there," Cassian ordered, his voice steady. "Prepare the fleet for immediate deployment." The Vanguard's engines hummed to life again, its massive form turning toward the UEC command station. As the ship moved closer to the heart of the coalition, Cassian's thoughts returned to the conversation with Zarak. The Cavari were licking their wounds, but they weren't defeated. Cassian had made sure of that. The Dominion had underestimated humanity's resilience, but they still held the cards of old alliances, of ancient powers waiting in the wings. As the Vanguard slipped into orbit of the UEC's central station, Cassian received another communication, this time from his trusted fleet commander, Admiral Saren. "General, we've got new intel. It seems the Talisians are taking advantage of the chaos left behind by the Cavari. They've been quietly fortifying their positions along the edge of the galactic frontier." Cassian's brow furrowed. "Fortifying? What do you mean?" "Their fleet is positioning along the borders of the Faldar Rift.
The Talisians have always been opportunistic. If they sense weakness, they won't hesitate to push. Cassian knew the Talisians well, a cunning species, always quick to exploit the cracks in any peace. The Kavari made a mistake when they thought humanity would crumble, but now another danger was on the rise. The Talisians are known for their unpredictable strategies, and if they're setting their sights on the outer rim, the peace humanity had fought for was in even more jeopardy. "Prepare the fleet for any action," Cassian said sharply. "We won't let the Talisians seize the opportunity. I need all positions reassigned and updated." "Understood, General." Cassian closed the comm and turned to Tanis, who was still watching the tactical display. "Keep an eye on the Talisian movements. If they make a move, we need to be ready. I'll deal with the council meeting and these new alliances later. This needs to be handled first." Tanis nodded, but Cassian could see the concern in her eyes. "Understood, sir. We'll keep them in check." As the Vanguard docked at the Central Command Station, Cassian stepped off the bridge and into the meeting chamber. The council had been hastily arranged. It was an emergency session, and Cassian knew exactly what that meant. It wasn't just about diplomacy, it was about controlling the future. And right now, the galaxy was more uncertain than ever. Cassian entered the room where high-ranking officials from various species were already seated, waiting for him. Among them were the leaders of the Trevean Federation, a species known for their aggressive political tactics, and the Talisian Concord, with their ever-present aura of calculated mystery. General Varren, the UEC council leader, greeted him with a polite but cautious smile. "We've been expecting you." Cassian didn't waste time on pleasantries. "What's this about?" he asked bluntly, his voice carrying the weight of recent events. "We need to discuss post-war strategies," Celeste began. "The Kavari Dominion is defeated, but the Talisians are maneuvering. The Trevean Federation has proposed a defensive alliance to prevent further destabilization along the frontier." Cassian raised an eyebrow. "A defensive alliance with the Talisians?" The room fell silent as the Talisian representative, Ambassador Lorne, stepped forward. His appearance was serene, but there was a sharpness to his gaze that betrayed the calculation in every word. "Humanity has shown its strength, General," Lorne said smoothly. "The Kavari are down, but the true challenge remains. We have the opportunity to reshape this galaxy together, if only we set aside the old grudges and work as allies." Cassian clenched his fists, feeling the simmering anger from all the destruction the galaxy had endured. "I don't trust the Talisians," he said flatly. "You've always played both sides." Lorne smiled, but it wasn't a friendly one. "We play what the galaxy demands of us, General, and what it demands now is unity. You cannot afford to be alone in the void, not after what the Kavari have done." Cassian felt the weight of his brother's vision on him now. Elias had believed in unity, in working together with all species, but it was Cassian who had to face the ugly reality of how hard that unity was to maintain. "We're not alone," Cassian said, turning away from the Talisians and addressing the council. "But that doesn't mean we should trust everyone in this room. The Kavari were only the first threat. The Talisians are next, and if you think they'll sit idle, you're wrong." The council murmured in agreement, but no one spoke up. Cassian knew he had to be the one to lead. He could no longer rely on his brother's ideals. He had to build something stronger than peace. The galaxy is still teetering on the edge of another war.
The galaxy stood at a crossroads. Cassian had forced the Talisians' hand, but the path forward was unclear, and the cracks in the galaxy's fragile alliances were already starting to show. Cassian left the council chamber with a weight on his shoulders. The talks had spiraled into nothing but political posturing. The Talisians had promised unity, but their words were coated in a thick layer of deception. He had refused their alliance, not out of pride, but because something in him knew you didn't build peace on shaky ground. You built it on trust, and he had none for the Talisians. "General," Rask said as Cassian exited the chamber, his voice low. "We've received a communication from the Faldar Rift. It's the Talesian Concord. They're mobilizing." Cassian stopped in his tracks, his hand instinctively reaching for the comm panel on his belt. "What do they want?" "They're moving ships toward the edge of the rift, General," Rask continued, his voice tight with urgency. "It's a positioning maneuver. We think they're preparing for something, a strike or perhaps an occupation." Cassian's chest tightened. The Faldar Rift was a strategically vital region, and if the Talesians were encroaching, it would put every frontier world at risk. He had predicted their next move, but not this soon. "They won't get away with this," Cassian muttered. "Prepare the fleet. Set course for the Faldar Rift. I'll deal with this before they have a chance to strike." The Vanguard hummed back to life, its engines firing up as it set a course for the rift. Cassian stood at the command rail, his mind racing. The Talesians weren't just a threat anymore. They were a ticking time bomb. Every second wasted could lead to the destruction of countless colonies along the outer rim. But there was something more. The alliance had crumbled in front of his eyes, and now he was facing the consequences. The fragile peace that had held for so long was unraveling faster than he could track. "General, we've got eyes on the Talesian fleet. They're moving fast, too fast." "We won't give them the chance to secure a foothold," Cassian replied coldly. "Engage them immediately. We'll meet them before they have a chance to strike." The Vanguard leapt forward, its engines ablaze as it cut through the blackness of space toward the Faldar Rift. Cassian could feel the anticipation building inside him. There was no room for hesitation now. The Talesians had crossed a line, and he was ready to meet them with everything humanity had. As they approached the rift, Cassian surveyed the tactical display. The Talesians were already in formation, their ships moving in synchronized precision. A calculated move, but a predictable one. Cassian had spent years studying their patterns, and now he would use that knowledge to his advantage. "All ships, prepare to engage. Focus fire on their lead vessels," Cassian ordered. "We need to break their formation first. Once that's done, we'll deal with the rest." The human fleet surged forward, railguns charging, missiles locked on target. The Talesians attempted to counter, their phase shields flaring to life as they retaliated with harmonic pulses. The battlefield erupted in a symphony of light and sound.
Cassian felt the pulse of the battlefield deep within him, every decision a beat in the orchestra of war. The Talesian ships fought with their usual precision, but the UEC fleet was faster, more adaptive. Railguns tore through the shields, and missiles found their mark with deadly accuracy. But the Talesians were not easily broken. Their ships, though not as numerous as the Cavalry, were far more agile, moving with the precision of a blade cutting through the dark. Cassian had underestimated their speed, and now he was paying the price. "Sir, they're retreating," Tanis reported. "It's a feint. They're pulling back to regroup." Cassian's eyes narrowed. "Let them retreat. Don't chase them. I want them cornered, not scattered." The Talesians were playing their game, but so was Cassian. His fleet held steady, positioning itself to trap the enemy in the rift's narrow confines. Cassian's mind worked quickly, calculating their every move, anticipating where the Talesians would strike next. "Now," Cassian barked, "all ships engage at full power. We take them down now or we'll lose our chance." The human fleet moved with ruthless efficiency, cutting off the Talesians' retreat. The battle had only just begun, but Cassian could already see the cracks in the enemy's formation. They were strong, but they weren't invincible. Cassian had learned that much from the Cavalry. As the human ships closed in, the Talesians' shields began to buckle under the onslaught. Their formation was falling apart, the cracks widening. Cassian allowed himself a brief moment of satisfaction, but there was no time to savor it. This was a battle they had to win, and there could be no distractions. "Prepare for final assault," Cassian ordered, his voice cold and unwavering. "We finish this now." The fleet surged forward, its weapons systems primed and ready for the decisive blow. Cassian's gaze never wavered from the tactical display. The Talisians were retreating, but this time they wouldn't escape. The Talisians were on the run, but the war was far from over.
Victory felt hollow. The Talisians had been pushed back, but humanity was standing on the edge of a precipice, and Cassian knew the next steps would determine everything. Cassian watched as the last of the Talisian fleet limped away, retreating further into the depths of the Faldar Rift. The UEC fleet had been decisive, their weapons relentless, but now that the Talisians were gone, the cost of the war began to sink in. The Orinox Dominion had been shattered, the Talisians were fractured, but in their wake, a new, deeper conflict was emerging. "General," Lieutenant Rask's voice broke the silence, his tone cautious. "The Talisians are still jamming our comms from their retreat. We haven't received any direct reports from the UEC command since the battle ended." Cassian didn't turn around. His eyes were locked on the viewport, watching the distant stars stretch out before him. "Keep trying. If they want to play games, we'll play them right back. It's time we send a message." As the fleet fell into a holding pattern, Cassian let his thoughts wander to the consequences of his decisions. Victory was hard won, but it had come at a cost. Lives had been lost, entire colonies were now in jeopardy because of his choices, and the message to the galaxy was clear. Humanity was no longer a passive observer in the galaxy. The death of Elias, his twin, had ignited something in Cassian, and it had changed him. The quiet hum of the ship seemed louder now, more ominous. Cassian knew what was at stake. The Talisians were dangerous, yes, but there were others. There would always be others. The fight to preserve humanity's place in the galaxy was never over. "Sir, we've established comms with UEC Command," Tanis said, her voice steady as she approached him. "They're requesting your status report, but, there's something you should see first." Cassian turned to face her, his expression dark. "What is it?" "Incoming transmission, sir." Tanis gestured to the holographic display at the center of the bridge. "From the Kavari." Cassian's heart skipped a beat. The Kavari were supposed to be finished, but it seemed they weren't going down without a fight. He nodded grimly. "Put it through." The screen flickered to life, and once again the face of Archon Zirak appeared, his crest plates now dull, his once imposing presence significantly weakened. His eyes bore the weight of failure, but they were far from defeated. "General Cassian Varren," Zirak began, his voice cold but tinged with something that could only be described as a warning. "Humanity's actions have proven one thing. You are not afraid to fight. But make no mistake, General, the Orinox Dominion will rise again, and when we do, we will come for you." Cassian's jaw tightened. "Then you'll find us waiting." Zirak's expression remained unchanged. "You believe your victory over us is final, but you are gravely mistaken. The galaxy is a vast and unforgiving place, and there are powers far beyond your understanding, powers you've yet to face." Cassian's eyes narrowed. "We've fought your kind for years, Zirak. You can try to rebuild, but we'll be right there, ready for you. We don't forget who we fight." For a moment there was a long silence before Zirak spoke again. "This war will not be decided by the strength of your fleets, General. You may have won the battle, but the true war has yet to begin. You've lit the spark, but you have no idea what you've started." Cassian stood there, staring at the screen, but his mind was already racing. The Kavari were far from defeated. Their words echoed in his mind.
The true war. What did it mean? Was this just another play for power, or was there something bigger, something even more dangerous lurking in the shadows? As the transmission ended, the bridge was eerily quiet. Cassian couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming, something far worse than anything they had faced so far. "Sir, what do we do now?" Rask spoke up again, his voice firm. "I moved into leadership to preserve humanity, and I intend to do just that. We prepare for what comes next. The Kavari aren't finished, and neither are the Talasians. They've underestimated us before, but this time we're not waiting for them to make their move." He turned to Tanis. "Set a course for the Kavari Dominion. We're not running from this fight. Not anymore." Cassian's fleet wasn't just a collection of ships anymore. It was the last line of defense against a galaxy that had suddenly turned hostile. But Cassian wasn't ready to back down. He had led them through one war. He would lead them through the next. The Kavari had warned him that humanity had only ignited the true war. Cassian had already shown the galaxy what humanity was capable of. Now he would discover just how far the galaxy would go to stop them. As the Vanguard slipped through space, heading for the Kavari Dominion, Cassian's thoughts raced. The warning from Zarek still lingered in his mind. The Kavari were rebuilding, but were they really the true threat? Something about their final message had felt off. He couldn't shake the feeling that the Kavari were just a symptom of something much larger at play. Something darker. The fleet had been battle-tested, but Cassian had never been one to assume that a victory meant the end of the war. The Talisians were still out there, and the Kavari, though wounded, weren't going to quietly accept defeat. The bridge of the Vanguard was quiet now, the crew moving in a familiar rhythm, each of them knowing their role without a word needing to be said. But Cassian's mind was elsewhere, far from the stars in front of them. His twin brother's death had set everything in motion, but now it seemed like the consequences of that moment were spiraling out of control. The galaxy was changing, and humanity's place in it was becoming more uncertain with every passing day. "Sir," Rask's voice cut through the silence, "we've just received a report from the Talisian fleet. They're regrouping, and they've formed an alliance with the Orinox." Cassian's eyes snapped back to the display, where Rask was already pulling up the details. The Talisians and the Orinox? That was unexpected. The Orinox Dominion, a species known for their brutal tactics and iron grip on power, had always been neutral in the galactic conflict, preferring to stay out of others' business. But now it seemed they had aligned themselves with the Talisians, and that was a problem. "How many ships?" Cassian asked, his voice calm but with a hint of tension. 45, Rask answered, his face grim, "and they're positioning themselves along the Faldar Rift. They're setting up defensive lines." "Set course for the Rift," Cassian said, already thinking ahead. "We need to break this alliance before it has a chance to solidify." The Vanguard shifted course, its engines roaring to life once again as it sped toward the Faldar Rift. But Cassian couldn't help but feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him. The galaxy was becoming a powder keg, and every move he made seemed to light another fuse. "They're expecting us," Tanis said, as she examined the sensor data. "The Talisians are already mobilizing, and the Orinox are positioning their ships to block the way." Cassian stood at the command rail, his fists clenched. He had fought to secure peace, but now it seemed like peace was slipping further from his grasp with every passing day. The alliance between the Talisians and Orinox was not just a military threat, it was a political one. If they were allowed to unite their forces, it would shift the balance of power in the galaxy. "Get me a direct line to UEC command," Cassian ordered. "I need to inform them of the situation." As the comms officer worked to establish the connection, Cassian's mind continued to race. Every decision he made now would have lasting consequences. The Talisians and the Orinox had joined forces, and humanity was standing on the edge of another war. But Cassian had a plan. "General Varren," It was Ambassador Celeste from UEC Command. "What's the status?" "The Talisians and Orinox have formed an alliance," Cassian said, his voice firm. "They're positioned in the Faldar Rift, blocking the way. If we don't act quickly, they'll secure this region and fortify their position. We need to take them out before they consolidate their forces." "Understood," Celeste replied. "We'll provide you with reinforcements, but you'll need to act fast. The longer you wait, the stronger their position will become." Cassian's mind clicked into place. He knew exactly what he needed to do. "Prepare the fleet for an ambush," Cassian ordered. "We'll use their overconfidence against them. We'll hit them before they even know we're there." The Vanguard and the rest of the fleet shifted course once more, setting up a trap for the Talisians and the Orinox. The goal was simple: strike hard, strike fast, and take control of the rift before the Alliance could fully consolidate its power. "All ships maintain silence," Cassian commanded. "We drop out of warp in their blind spot, full power to the weapons." The fleet moved like a shadow in the dark, slipping into the Faldar Rift unnoticed. Cassian watched the tactical display, his eyes narrowing, as the Talisians and Orinox continued to position their forces, unaware of the trap closing around them. And then, without warning, Cassian gave the order. "Now!" The human fleet dropped out of warp in a deadly, coordinated strike. Railguns roared to life, missiles streaking toward their targets with surgical precision. The Talisians and Orinox ships scrambled, their shields flaring to life too late to prevent the onslaught. Cassian felt the exhilaration of the strike, but it was tempered by the knowledge that this battle was only a small part of a larger, more dangerous game. He had won the battle today, but the war for the galaxy's future was far from over. As the enemy fleet scattered, Cassian turned to Rask. "Prepare for the next phase. The Talisians will regroup. We need to keep them on the defensive." Rask matted, but Cassian could see the same wariness in his eyes. The alliance between the Talisians and Orinox might have been temporarily shattered, but Cassian knew it wasn't the end. The galaxy had a way of bouncing back, and this victory would only make the next threat that much stronger. Cassian had struck a blow to the Talisians and Orinox, but the true battle was still ahead.
Cassian thought he had seen the worst the galaxy could throw at him. He was wrong. The debris of the Talisian-Orinox fleet drifted in the quiet vacuum of the Faldar Rift, the echo of their failure still hanging in the air. Cassian's fleet had struck with precision, tearing through the Alliance's defenses and scattering their forces. But as the Vanguard hovered in the aftermath, Cassian knew this wasn't over. The Talisians were regrouping. The Orinox were retreating. This battle was won, but it was just a prelude to something far darker. "General," Rask's voice cut through the tension. "The fleet secured the rift. We're holding the region, but there's something strange. The Talisians are pulling back, but there's no sign of reinforcements. It's almost as if they're waiting for something." Cassian frowned. Waiting for what? The Talisians don't retreat like this, not unless they've got something up their sleeves. Tanis stepped forward, her face grim. "We've received a strange transmission, sir. It's encrypted, but it's not from any of the usual fleets. It's coming from deep within Kavari space." Cassian's pulse quickened. The Kavari had been quiet since their defeat, their shattered fleet still licking its wounds, but now their presence was stirring once more. Cassian had already defeated them, hadn't he? Or so he thought. "Patch it through," Cassian ordered, his voice a low growl. The room fell into tense silence as the transmission was decrypted and the screen flickered to life. The face that appeared wasn't familiar, but the eyes, those cold, calculating eyes, were unmistakable. "General Cassian Varren." The voice was calm, almost soothing, but it carried an unsettling weight. "We meet at last." Cassian's heart stopped. He knew that voice. He had heard it in the dark hours of the war, in whispered conversations between the Kavari leadership. It was the voice of Commander Virek, a name long buried in the records of war.
The Cavari Dominion had used him as a secret weapon, an officer whose actions were hidden from the public eye. He had been their shadow, their ultimate asset, and now, it seemed, he had returned. "Virek," Cassian breathed, his voice a mix of disbelief and anger. "You're alive." "Alive, yes, but more importantly, I've been waiting for this moment, General. You thought you had defeated the Cavari, but you were mistaken. You never faced the true strength of our Dominion." Cassian's grip on the command rail tightened. "What do you want, Virek?" "What I want, General," Virek said, his tone as smooth as velvet, "is for you to understand something. The Cavari Dominion is not a single entity. We are more than just the ships you destroyed, more than the fleet you shattered. We are a network, a force that has infiltrated every corner of the galaxy. And now, the network is complete. The Cavari are more than just a people. We are a collective, a force that no one can defeat, not even you." Cassian's mind raced. If the Cavari had been a network, an entire system of hidden cells, Cassian realized he had only struck the outer layers. Virek wasn't just a soldier, he was the architect of something far darker. "You think you can take on humanity?" Cassian's voice was laced with contempt. "You're nothing but remnants of a fallen empire." Virek smiled, a cruel twist of his lips. "The empire, General, was never the true power. What you destroyed were pawns, but now I offer you a choice. Join me. Join the true Cavari Dominion, and together we will reshape this galaxy. Humanity will have its place, but only if it acknowledges its rightful role." Cassian's thoughts were racing. The Cavari had always been ruthless, but this was different. They had been using humanity as a tool in their greater plan. It was never about conquest. It was about manipulation, infiltration. They had played the long game, and now Cassian was their final piece. "No," Cassian said firmly. "I'd rather die than join the likes of you." Virek's expression darkened. "Then we will continue our game, General. But make no mistake, this war is far from over. You may have beaten us on the battlefield, but the true power lies in the shadows, and it is those shadows that will swallow your fleet whole." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in oppressive silence. "Sir," Tanis said, her voice shaky, "what do we do now?" Cassian stood tall, his eyes fixed on the stars beyond the viewport. "Now," he said, his voice hard and unwavering, "we prepare for war. The Cavari think they can control the galaxy from the shadows. They've underestimated humanity. They've underestimated me." He turned to face his crew, his gaze resolute. "We'll strike first. We take the fight to them, and we make sure they never see us coming." The Vanguard's engines hummed to life again, the fleet moving in formation. But this time, Cassian wasn't just fighting for survival. He was fighting for something deeper. He was fighting for the future of humanity, for the right to live in a galaxy free from the Cavari's manipulation. "Plot a course for the heart of Cavari space," Cassian commanded. "This time, we finish it." The Cavari had revealed their true face, and now humanity's greatest challenge awaited. The Cavari had thought they could control the galaxy from the shadows, but shadows were nothing more than places for light to break through. The Vanguard's engines roared to life, pushing humanity's most powerful ship toward the heart of Cavari space. Cassian stood at the bridge's command rail, his gaze fixed on the stars ahead. His crew, ever vigilant, moved with practiced precision around him, but the tension was palpable. The Cavari had played their hand, revealing just how deep their roots had spread, how vast their influence had been. Now it was time to pull those roots up, every last one. "General," Tanis said, breaking the silence, "we've locked on to the coordinates of the Cavari Central Command. They're expecting us. Our intel shows they're preparing a massive defensive grid." Cassian nodded. They may be expecting us, but they're underestimating how far we've come. We'll hit them where they're weakest. No direct assault. We infiltrate, disrupt, and destroy from within. Prepare a covert strike force. Rask looked up from his station, his voice quiet but tense. General, this isn't just a mission anymore. This is a fight for everything we've built. If we fail, they'll turn this galaxy into their puppet. No more second chances. Cassian met his gaze. Then we make sure we don't fail. The Vanguard surged forward, cutting through the blackness of space, its dark silhouette a harbinger of what was to come. As they approached Kavari space, the enormity of the task ahead began to settle in. The Kavari, with all their manipulation, had twisted entire star systems into submission. They had infected every corner of the galaxy with their influence, and now humanity had to undo it, or face extinction. "We're in position," Rask called out. "Comm channels are open. We've scrambled their sensors, but they'll still detect the strike force soon." Cassian didn't flinch. "Good. Let them detect us. Make sure they think they're going to win. The longer they think they have control, the more powerful our strike will be." "Strike force ready," Tanis reported, her fingers moving over her console. "All ships have launched. We're approaching the Kavari stronghold." Cassian's heart beat in sync with the steady hum of the Vanguard's engines. The Kavari's power had always been built on secrecy, on shadows. But no more. This was the moment where the light would break through, shattering their hold on the galaxy once and for all. "Initiate Phase 1, Cassian ordered, his voice steady. "Disrupt their command center." The fleet split into smaller units, each tasked with different parts of the operation. One group would disable the Kavari's internal communications network. Another would target the energy grid, keeping the defenses intact. And the third, the most dangerous, would infiltrate the central command, deep within Kavari's core. It was a delicate balance: strike hard, strike fast, and get out before the Kavari could retaliate. Kavari ships flickered on the tactical display, their defenses already beginning to power up, but humanity had the advantage of surprise. For now, they didn't know exactly where the strikes would come from. Cassian smiled, a grim edge to his expression. The Kavari had always been overconfident. Today, that overconfidence would cost them. "Phase 1 is complete," Tanis reported, her fingers moving over her console. "Energy grid compromised. They're scrambling to reroute." "Perfect," Cassian said, his eyes locked on the ever-changing battlefield. "Now, Phase 2. Prepare for full assault on the command center." As his ships moved toward the central Kavari stronghold, Cassian felt the weight of the moment. His brother, Elias, had believed in diplomacy, in the power of peace. But Cassian had learned a hard truth. Peace without power was a lie, and the galaxy would never bend to those who sought to dominate without fear of consequences. The command center, a massive structure within the heart of Kavari space, loomed ahead. It was an ancient structure, built into a planet that had once been a beacon of Kavari strength. Now it was a crumbling monument to their arrogance. The Vanguard led the charge, its weapons ready for the final strike. "We've broken through their outer defenses," Rask said, "entering the command center's orbital zone." "Stay sharp," Cassian ordered. "The Kavari will be ready to strike back. We're in their home turf now." Cassian's fleet moved like a single coordinated entity, overwhelming the remaining defenses as they pushed through the atmosphere toward the heart of the fortress. But the Kavari weren't going down without a fight. Suddenly, their ships began to reconfigure, like a living organism adapting to its prey. The Vanguard shuddered as a Kavari battleship unleashed a wave of concentrated plasma fire. The shields held, but the force was enough to make the entire ship tremble. Cassian's eyes narrowed. They had expected this kind of resistance. They were deep in enemy territory now, and the Kavari had one last weapon in reserve: Virek. "General," Tana said, her voice laced with urgency. "We've detected an enemy flagship emerging from the atmosphere. It's not like any Kavari ship we've seen before. It's massive and heavily armored." Cassian's grip tightened on the command rail. "It's him," he said, his voice low with recognition. "Virek's ship. He's coming to finish what he started." Cassian's fingers flew across his console. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers, target their weak points, and hit them with everything we've got." The Vanguard rocketed forward, narrowly avoiding the barrage of fire from the enemy flagship. The final confrontation had begun. "We've got one shot at this," Cassian muttered, his eyes locked on the view screen. "Take it down, or we won't make it out alive." The Kavari flagship loomed ahead, its hull a fortress of dark metal, but Cassian knew its weak points. Virek had made a mistake. He had underestimated humanity's adaptability. "Fire!" Cassian commanded. The Vanguard's weapon systems lit up, railguns and energy beams striking the Kavari flagship with all the fury of a galaxy that refused to bow. The flagship's defenses buckled under the relentless assault, and with one final blast, the ship exploded in a burst of light. Cassian's breath came in short, sharp bursts, but his face remained calm. The Kavari had been dealt a devastating blow. But there was no time to celebrate. As the debris from the flagship scattered, Cassian knew the galaxy was still watching, waiting for humanity's next move. "General," Tana said, her voice a whisper of awe, "we did it!" Cassian stared out at the wreckage. "Not yet," he said quietly, "but we've taken the first step." The Kavari had fallen, but the galaxy was far from safe.
The Kavari were broken. Their flagship lay in ruins and their influence in the galaxy shattered. But as the wreckage floated in the void, Cassian knew that this victory had only opened the door to an even darker chapter. Cassian stood on the bridge of the Vanguard, staring at the remnants of the Kavari flagship through the viewport. The battle had been intense, and the Kavari had fought with all the desperation of a dying empire. But now the void was quiet. Too quiet. "General," Rask's voice broke through the silence, "the Kavari forces are retreating. We've received word that their remaining ships are making a run for the outer reaches of their territory." Cassian nodded, but the feeling of victory was fleeting. The Kavari were defeated, yes, but their reach was long, and their network of alliances was still a force to be reckoned with. The Talesians, the Orinox, and now the remnants of the Kavari would be regrouping, planning their next move. "We've won the battle," Cassian said slowly, turning to face his crew, "but we haven't won the war. Not yet." Tanis looked up from the tactical display, her expression hard. "Sir, the Talesians are already regrouping. We've been tracking their movements. They've retreated into deep space, but we suspect they'll come back. We need to strike fast if we're going to keep them on their heels." Cassian's jaw tightened. The Talesians had been a constant thorn in humanity's side, and now that the Kavari were temporarily neutralized, they would be the next force to deal with. "Send a message to UEC Command. We need reinforcements. We can't fight them alone." As the transmission was sent, Cassian felt the weight of his choices. Elias had believed that diplomacy could hold the galaxy together, but Cassian had learned something else. Diplomacy without strength was nothing more than a temporary peace. The galaxy had shown its true face in the wake of the Kavari's fall, and humanity's place in it was still fragile. "General," Rask said, breaking his thoughts, "there's more. We've intercepted another communication, this time from a neutral faction." Cassian raised an eyebrow. "A neutral faction? Who?" "The Elysians, sir," Rask replied. "They've been quiet for years, but now they're offering an alliance. They say they've been watching the recent events unfold and believe the galaxy needs a new order. They want to discuss a ceasefire and a new peace agreement." Cassian's thoughts immediately went to the Elysians. They were a mysterious species, isolated from the galaxy's major powers for centuries. Their technology was advanced, and their philosophies had always leaned toward pacifism, but their methods were as enigmatic as their motives. "Open a channel,"
Cassian said. "Let's see what they want." The screen flickered, and the face of an Elysian ambassador appeared on the display. His features were delicate, almost ethereal, with eyes that seemed to shimmer like starlight. His voice, though calm, carried an unsettling weight. "General Cassian Varren," the ambassador began, his tone smooth. "We have been observing the events in the galaxy. The conflict between your people and the Kavari has caused ripples that will reach every corner of the universe. The time for endless war is over. Humanity's victory is admirable, but it comes at a cost. You have burned bridges with the powers of the galaxy. We offer you a choice: peace or the continuation of a fractured universe." Cassian's pulse quickened. "What are you offering, and what's your angle, Elysian? You've always kept to yourselves." The Elysian's eyes glinted, and for a moment Cassian thought he saw something ancient, something far beyond the peaceful facade they projected. "We offer a path to true peace, General," the Elysian ambassador replied, his voice almost soothing. "But peace comes at a price. We want to help you rebuild the galaxy, not just the power structure, but the hearts of those who live within it. But you must relinquish your reliance on warfare as a means of survival." Cassian's thoughts whirred. The Elysians had always been detached, observing but never engaging. What did they really want, and why now, after everything that had happened? "You want us to give up our defenses?" Cassian said, his voice cutting through the conversation. "To put down our weapons and hope the galaxy won't try to kill us again?" "We seek a world where weapons are a last resort, General," the Elysian said, almost as if he were speaking to a child. "You have proven humanity's strength, but strength must be tempered with wisdom. We offer a path forward, but only if you choose peace." Cassian stared at the screen, his fists clenched at his sides. The Elysians were offering peace, but Cassian knew the price was more than just laying down arms. Another challenge loomed, not in the form of another enemy fleet, but in the form of the choices they would have to make in the coming months. "Prepare for the next phase," Cassian said, his voice firm. "Humanity's path forward is ours to decide, and I won't let anyone dictate it for us." The Vanguard slowly turned, its engines quiet as they waited for the next move. Cassian had won many battles, but the true fight, the fight for humanity's place in the galaxy, had just begun. The Elysians offered peace, but Cassian knew the price was more than just laying down arms. May this message strengthen your faith and renew your hope. Thank you for staying until the end. If this touched your heart, like, share, and subscribe to Astro Realms for more uplifting content. May God's blessings overflow in your life. See you soon.